Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to another episode of That Nerdy Site Show. Let me switch over the decal on the video version real quick. There we go. Weekly podcast where the team members from That Nerdy Site get together to talk about our lives and all of the nerdy things we love about them. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and joining me this week, once again, Cameron Abbott. How you doing, Cameron?
Hey, what's going on?
What's going on is we are back from a week off after Cameron was out sick last week. So we're going to be playing a little bit of catch-up today. I have Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom thoughts. Cameron has been playing through Unicorn Overlord and finished that up this week. So we'll get his thoughts on that. And then I went and saw a couple of movies in the last couple weeks. I went and saw Saturday Night this weekend, and then last weekend I went and saw The Wild Robot, which I would have talked about in last week's episode if we had it. So that's what's on the docket for today. Neither of us seeing Joker Folie à Deux, as it seems most people are not seeing Joker Folie à Deux this weekend.
Yeah.
So...
If people want to know, like as a brief summary of that spoiler cast, Trevor and I basically both said neither of us wanted to see that movie the original Joker ever again.
Yeah.
Because it was just, we saw that, funny, like I was having a thought about it, it's like, oh, that's also like where you like invited me to become part of that nerdy site, was that we went to that viewing of it.
Yep.
And at the Alamo in Chandler.
Yep.
Because that was the halfway point from being all the way out in unincorporated Santan Valley, where I used to live.
And back when it was still an Alamo Draft House.
Yep. Yeah.
Back when we still had those here in Arizona.
Yeah. But I was thinking about that. I was like, oh, wow, yeah, that's how long it's been since with that all happening. But also with Joker, like our spoiler cast, like, oh, wait, we didn't have a spoiler cast because we were on a podcast at the time.
We're doing podcasting at the time.
Yeah, never mind. I take that back. There's no spoiler cast for you to go look up. I don't know why. I think I've just been used to, like, I forgot that there was a point in my life where I was done podcasting. And I forgot about that. So there was no spoiler cast on that. My apologies, everybody. If you're like scrambling, looking for it, you're like, what did they think about it? We both thought it was like really well done, but at the end of the day, it was just not a movie for repeat viewing for us.
And it was very much as soon as this one's been like, they've been talking about it, and it's going to be a musical. They're going to bring in Lady Gaga and all this stuff for years. And I'm just like, everything you introduce about this makes me want to say it even less.
Yep.
And it seems like, based on word of mouth, that I'm okay feeling that way on that. So yeah, we will not be talking about that any more in depth because we did not go and see it this weekend. If you like what you hear, please remember to like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. So diving in first to start things out, the big new game that I've been playing recently, because I've also just been playing a ton of Baldur's Gate 3 now that it's got full mod support on consoles and stuff, but I did take a break away from that to play The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. I finished it up earlier this week, maybe Monday or Tuesday. I don't think I've 100%ed the game or anything, but I did most of like the little side stuff in it and definitely beat the game. And overall, I had a fun time with it. I think it is a great blending of kind of old 2D Zelda games and the like Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom style of game design in terms of like, hey, here's a tool set, and you have, any kind of option to do these things in. It's probably biggest direct parallel is Link Between Worlds, I think, maybe, because it is very much you can pretty much go anywhere, but you might not be able to do just everything yet. And Link Between Worlds, like, its whole big thing was, yeah, you're going to get your special items from the dungeons, but you can also, like, rent the items if you want to do things in a different order or out of order. This is very much more in the line of, like, I guess it is like Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom style in terms of, like, yeah, you can go anywhere, but here's, like, the 2 yellow dots on the map of, like, here are the dungeons we're recommending you go do next to kind of progress through the storyline stuff. For those not familiar, you play as Zelda in yet another cycle of the Zelda Link Ganondorf kind of triumvirate. And in this game, Link basically gets sucked up by a like shadow realm kind of thing and it falls to Zelda to get out there, save the day.
Big role reversal. It's very cool.
Big role reversal. Link is still, helping, kind of doing his stuff, on the side, kind of off screen, in the background, in the Shadow Realm kind of stuff. So you kind of cross paths with him over the course of the game. And a lot of your abilities end up being a little bit like Link infused. There is like a little there's like a little meter that you'll unlock that lets you kind of turn into like the warrior princess, where you can slash a sword, or eventually you can shoot arrows, you can drop bombs, but like the time ticks down on that, and you need to kind of build up a pool of energy to have that ability. The majority of the game you're playing, you're given a new ability called the Echoes, where you basically will find items or creatures in the world, and especially with items, an item will be like glowing, glimmering, and you'll go up to it and you press like the right trigger button or something, and it's like, okay, you've learned that item, and now you can create an echo of that item. So like the first one you're gonna find is like a bed. Okay, now I can create a bed, and I can stack a bed on another bed and create like a little stairway out of a little dungeon kind of thing, or something like that. When you defeat enemies, they will leave behind kind of an echo shard that you can basically capture, and now you can summon that enemy.
Oh, cool. Okay, so there's like enemy, like it's monster summoning and other stuff like that too.
Yeah.
I just thought it was furniture.
Yep. Nope. Enemy summoning as well. And you have this little being around you that is basically like a member of the magical beings that help seal up these like shadow rifts that are being kind of created around the world. Cool. But this little being follows you around, and basically like works with Zelda to summon the items or creatures. You're limited at first, like you can only summon 3 bars worth of a thing, or like 3, like it's another currency where it's like, okay, Tri has 3 little triangles behind her, or it, I guess. I don't know if it's a he, she, it, so we'll say it. 3 little triangles, and like summoning a bed costs 1 triangle. So you can summon 3 triangles to start, but maybe you find like a moblin or something later on. Oh, the moblin, if I want to summon that's 2 triangles. So I can summon a combination of a moblin and a bed or something like that. Fun little thing with the bed mechanic is you can rest in the beds and like restore your health like over time. So there were definitely boss battles where I was like, I'm low on health. I'm going to run away from the fight for a little bit, drop down a bed, hop in bed while the enemy's like doing their attack.
I heard about this, yes.
And just heal up some health, and then jump out of the bed and run around the battlefield and basically like restore my health over time before going back and actually doing the fight. But yeah, over the course of the game, as you like seal rifts and stuff, Tri's power level starts increasing, and that takes usually 2 forms. It takes the form of either getting more triangles to its tail. So, okay, now you can summon 4 triangles worth, or 5, or 6 triangles worth of things. Or, with certain levels, the cost of various echoes will drop by a triangle. So, a thing that used to cost 3 triangles now only costs 2 triangles. And so you can summon more of that thing, or kind of mix and match more like that. So that's kind of the core mechanic that you're playing with over the course of the game. I really, really like that core mechanic for the puzzles in this. I think it does the thing that we saw in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. It inspires a ton of creativity and ingenuity in terms of like how you want to go about solving these problems. Admittedly, most of my problems ended up being solved by just stacking a whole bunch of beds on one another to like create a stairwell to the place I was trying to get to. But awesome. Sometimes that doesn't work, and you need to, you'll get like trampolines, or you'll get like a platform that can like, it's basically like a big thwomp kind of thing where you can like jump on the platform and go up when the platform goes up, and maybe jump off to, the height that you need to be at. Or they have, it's much more in the classic Zeldas than the more modern ones, but like the little tiles that'll come out of the ground, spin and attack you, those are an enemy. So like when those, when those break, you can get the echo of that. And then you can create one of those and basically like jump on it and go flying in a path. So like, oh, there's a lava bridge or there's a lava, lake that I need to cross from like point A to point B. And it's too wide of a path for me to do my little, stepping of beds, but I can build up a couple of them and then drop one of these blocks and kind of jet across the rest of the way or something like that. So I really enjoy it for the puzzle solving stuff. And I think there's probably a lot of like creative other solutions. The combat, I think, is where, especially by the end of the game, this mechanic just kind of wore thin for me. Is in particular, and maybe it's it's very much I could have made this more fun for myself if I had really like explored and played around with different combinations of summoning enemies. But I would usually just kind of summon like the biggest, baddest, strongest enemy I would have.
Sure.
And there's no cooldown or anything. So if that enemy dies, the 3 triangles it cost me to summon that enemy are immediately back in my pool, and I can just resummon the enemy again.
Well, there you go. Yeah.
So there's no like penalty to doing that. Or even if like you drop an enemy and they kind of have their little like wind up animation, they do their attack, and then they have to like move, to re-engage with the enemy or something like that. It's quicker if I move over, re-engage with the enemy, drop a fresh one. So basically, like if I drop, if I drop a 3-tier enemy, it will just it goes from like oldest to newest summon stuff. So if I had like, I had a couple other things that were summoned, and I'm going to need to draw on those other triangles to like to summon this new thing, those will just disappear, and I drop the guy again. So there was a lot of like combats where it was just kind of like, all right, I'm just spamming dropping this enemy, letting him fight whoever he needs to fight, and then occasionally I would like press the button to switch Zelda into like Link mode and go in and hack and slash, to fight off like the enemy, get my hands dirty a little bit. But my big thing was very much like, so like it is such a passive, for lack of a better term, combat style of it's the Pokemon thing of like, I'm summoning a creature to fight my fights for me, that when that's happening and when the fight is happening, I'm basically just controlling Zelda to keep her from being hit by stray bullets or something like that. Whatever like effects are going on in the world, I'm just trying to keep her from being hit and hurt by this, while the creatures that I've summoned are doing all of the heavy lifting. And so it just kind of ends up being like, unsatisfying in that regard. There are some cases where it's like, I very clearly need to use like this type of enemy for this fight. Like there's a boss maybe later on in the game where it's like, I need to electrify part of their body to like stun them and then like go in for the attack stuff. And there are only a few enemies that will actually go in and do that stunning. So, like, okay, for this particular fight, I need to use this type of enemy. But for the most part, like, so the biggest like quality of life pain point in this game is easily how you select the echoes, because it is the exact same, like selecting the arrow, the thing you're going to put on the arrow at the end in Tears of the Kingdom, where it's just one long line of shit, and you have to just like slide through, blade through to get the thing you want.
Yeah,
they give you the options of like sorting by most used, newest, most expensive, least expensive, whatever. And for the most part, I just kept mine to like most used. But that meant, okay, well, now I've got a new thing, and I need to go in and use that a few times. It becomes like, okay, I've got to pause to pull up this thing, slide through 70 different freaking echoes that I've found over the course of this game, and find the one that I'm looking for, and deploy it. And because now I've used that once, it has moved in this list away from all the things that I've never used. And so now the next time I need to go and deploy it, it's in a completely different place and I got to go find that again. And so there's like a lot of annoying frustrations around that kind of thing where I guess there it's like, switch to recently used is the idea, but it's still like, there are way too many echoes for you to find. And the benefit is, sure, there are a million different solutions that you can have. But the game also doesn't like reward you for, finding different creative solutions. So if you're going to be like I was and like, all right, this is the path of least resistance. I know this is a solution that will work for me. So I'm just going to do this, even if, there might be other ways I could have done this with fewer Triforce things, or I say Triforce because they're triangles and your creatures try. They're not the Triforce, but it's weird. But little triangle things. But yeah, so I found myself just kind of like using the same solutions, or especially in combat, I got at one point a like 5-star creature. Seems to be like one of maybe 2 or 3 in the game or something like that.
Dang. Okay.
And so
cool.
I was just like, all right, I'm just going to summon that thing. And it just wrecks shop. It can, one hit kill a whole bunch of enemies and stuff like that. So I just kind of let that do its thing and just kind of like hang back. If it, does eventually die, just immediately summon it again and let it take out the next wave of enemies and stuff like that. So, especially like, getting that kind of stuff. It's like, okay, well, now I'm being extra passive and just kind of watching the game happen around me, which has a whole extra layer of like commentary in a game where like, this is the one that's supposed to be about giving Zelda agency in the story. Yeah. And you still immediately take her agency away. And it was so the thing that I really would have loved to have seen would have been more of like a do this, but make Zelda more
active,
in line with her chic persona.
There you go.
Make her a very capable fighter on her own accord and not helpless damsel that's just kind of stumbled into this magical power that lets the enemies do her fighting for her. So yeah, that's the pain points of the game is like, I really love the echo stuff and the creativity that it inspires for solutions, even if a lot of times you don't really need to go too far outside the norm to find your solution. You can like throughout the entire game, the bed, the first item you get, the very simple 2-tile bed was the most used item in my repertoire. Eventually you get a thing that lets you like, you get an enemy that basically is like a fire enemy, and you can use to like light torches and stuff, or melt ice. And that became like another of my most common, most frequently used things. So I basically had like 4 or 5 that were like always there in the top bracket of these are the things I'm always going back to and always using. And then, probably like 30 or 40 echoes that I acquired and then just never did anything with. Because it's like, I don't need that because I've got better versions of that, or I've got other things that do what that can do. And they're, I'm more familiar with them. They're more easily in my repertoire and kind of stuff. So, but overall, it's really fun to have like classic Legend of Zelda style dungeons again. So that was a lot of fun of this game. Also, and this was something I probably wouldn't have identified or thought of, but because like our friends over at Kinda Funny had called it out before I jumped in and started playing it, like in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, so much of that in many times empty world is also very silent as you're just kind of like going around, or it's very like slight ambient noise or something like that. And this having, classic Zelda kind of theme and music throughout was much, more active and fun in that regard.
That's cool. That's a nice note for it to have as like on a plus side, is that it keeps a like really solid soundtrack throughout the entire thing.
Yeah. some other fun little things. A lot of fun little characters, and because this is very much in the like Link's Awakening remake style of like chibi art style stuff. But it is its own version of Hyrule. It's probably most closely aligned with the Link to the Past Hyrule. But even there, it's like no, it's its own place. But still has like oh, the Gerudo village and the Zora, and there's like populated with lots of people, and you can go in and like they'll each have their own little shopkeeps, or they'll have like little side quests.
That's
and
cool.
little mini things to do. A lot of the side quests will be like, hey, I'm looking for this kind of thing, and it's like, oh, they want me to summon that creature in front of them, and that's how I'll get the reward for this or something like that. I will say a lot of the rewards were for the puzzles did end up somewhat being letdowns, because a lot of times it's just like, oh, I solve a puzzle, and like I would feel like, oh, I really liked how I solved that puzzle, or how I found a way to get to this chest, and then I open the chest and it's like 20 rupees, and I'm like, all right, well that's lame. I feel like that should have at least been like a piece of a heart or something like that. So there were a lot of those kinds of situations where it's like, oh, I feel like the reward didn't match the difficulty level that went along with this particular thing.
Yeah.
But still a very fun game overall. I'd probably lean towards it. I think it's an 8 flat for me on the That Nerdy sale. A great game. That great game. It is certainly consistently a good game.
Yeah.
And I think there is enough to like push it into great territory, even with these like big, glaring pain points of the design and the style. There is, fun story stuff around it. There's fun little mini games you can do throughout. Again, like the rewards kind of hit or miss, but if the reward is the self-satisfaction of how I solve that puzzle, cool, great. Give me more than 20 rupees though. Because that's another thing. Like, I mean, rupees. So like there is like a little equipment mechanic where you will acquire accessories over the course of the game, and they'll like the accessories will be like, oh, if you equip this accessory, it will increase the likelihood that you'll find rupees in in the
Gotcha.
world, or hearts, or
you can affect the drop
components.
Rate,
components for. So this doesn't have like a full blown cooking game, but it does have a series of smoothies shops that you can basically like combine 2 items to make a smoothie that will restore your health and give you some kind of benefit, like
That's cool.
faster swim speed or stuff like that.
It's a smoothie, huh?
Yep, smoothies.
It's fine.
So there's little accessories there, and the biggest thing I ended up finding like a reason to spend money was when you find the Great Fairy, she will increase your accessory slots for X number of rupees. So like the first time it's like, hey, give me 100 rupees and you can equip a second accessory. Give me 300 and you can equip 3 accessories. 500, 1,000 kind of thing. And so that was like what I was spending my rupees on, because otherwise I was just getting plenty of rupees, because you still also find them in the world from defeating enemies and stuff like that. You can also sell like the ingredient components that you get for the Slurpee or the Slurpee slushies. I don't remember which one I said. Smoothie. There you go. So you like, there was never a point where I was like, oh, I'm hurting for rupees. Okay. Probably because I was getting so many of them in rewards.
There you go.
But yeah, lots of fun. There's also this like little kind of ongoing mini quest thing or side quest over the course of the game where like this character has created like stamp locations in off the beaten path places, and it's
cool, like little geocache, little geocache kind of things, yep. Like urban or rural explorer type stuff.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, pretty much just like,
or
there's
hiking stuff. Like that's a big thing in like hiking.
Yeah,
you hike, absolutely. And you get a stamp for it.
Yep, it's very much like you go there, you get the thing, you like, it adds a stamp to your card. Some of them are wide open, very easy to get to and see. So others are like, oh, I see it up there. Now how am I going to get to that place? Okay, that's a little puzzle in and of itself. And like for every 5 that you find, you get some sort of reward, and usually either an item or a piece of heart or rupees or something like that. So it was a cool little like, and the character kind of like, when you get that 5th one, he kind of pops in. He's like, haha, hooray! I've got a friend in the stamp collecting community. Thank you. And like he's basically like, he's not Tingle, but he's basically the Tingle of this this kind of world, or the Beetle. So, but yeah, lots of fun to be had in the game. But overall, if they were to like do another one of these, it would be very interesting. To see how they evolve on some of the ideas presented here, or just kind of like what they carry away from this moving forward. This does very much feel like the next, hey, we can't always make a Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom.
Yeah.
But how can we keep some of the fun, do whatever you want to do, problem solving in those, and like I've seen videos of like, oh, people are mixing and matching some of the echoes they can create in crazy and fun wild ways. But yeah, what's the like best way to kind of make those games moving forward? And this is certainly a solid effort. Yeah, great game. Had a lot of fun with it. It's also an interesting. Overall, an interesting story to go along with it, just in terms of how it does kind of switch things up in the Link, Zelda, Ganon dynamics of things. I mean, like I guess spoilers for the very, very beginning of the game, but this is the Link that basically gets sucked away at the beginning of the game is a Link that has not actually met Zelda yet, or that Zelda has not met yet. So like when it's like Zelda, just for the opening chunk of the game, just refers to this guy as like the kid in the blue tunic or something like that. And it's not until like she meets other people in some of the towns and like she finds like Link's childhood hometown kind of thing. And they're talking about the fact that he was, a swordsman off on this quest, that like you really start to piece together. So it's an interesting, just from there, it's like this is a Link and Zelda that hadn't met yet. And like it's basically like, it was the end of a Link's journey, but it's here's the beginning of Zelda's.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's very much like especially like the opening chunk of the game is you're playing as a like fully 20 hearted out Link. All of his stuff is maxed out, and he's going to fight Ganon to save Zelda in the final battle kind of thing. And yeah, that's just the opening intro of the game. So yeah, it was a fun like, that's the end of a completely other game that has happened out in this world.
That's so cool. That's really, really cool. I really dig that. I know I love the idea of it and everything. I would have picked it up too if I wasn't unemployed and had money. But like just the overall, like I love the idea of it. I thought that the reveal for it was incredible. It's good to hear like the systems are solid, even if like they do have like some gaps in between like the playability aspect of the game, like setting these things out and then going, and then what does that have to do with Zelda? It's like, but it's also like how do you juxtapose do you do like a chic Zelda thing, which I think you were like, hey, that could have been a solution, or do you do more like, hey, this is Zelda the mage, right? Like Zelda.
This is very much, and they play fully into the myth of like a swordsman, a priestess, and a I don't remember what they call
like
Ganondorf
Demon
in
Lord,
this, but
Demon King, basically.
But yeah, like it's probably a swordsman and a priestess will come and save us in our darkest times. This kid was clearly a swordsman. You must be the priestess. You have to, help us, Zelda, kind of thing.
I mean, that makes sense, and I think that's really, really cool. I think. So is this a Princess Zelda? Is she a princess though?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Clarify that. No, but I think the entire idea of like, one of my favorite things about it's I forgot what it is. Age of Calamity, the Zelda Musou.
Yeah.
Like the second Zelda Musou game. One of my favorite things about that as Zelda was that there was two versions of her. There was the priestess version with like light powers, and then there was the engineer version with using the Sheikah slate and like all the different like Sheikah tools to do combat and stuff. And so I was hoping for a little bit more of like that aspect of it. I think it'd be really like the idea of it's pretty cool. I love the idea of it. I think it's really, really cool. Obviously, I haven't played it yet. So
there is going back to the like you have that like limited energy resource that lets you turn into more sword fighter Zelda for a little bit.
Yeah.
Over the course of the game, you're also finding like strange, pieces or something that basically let you power up that ability.
Oh, cool.
So you can either extend your energy bar with, X number of pieces, or you can increase the strength that your sword has, or once you get arrows and bombs, you can increase kind of the strength of those and unlock like special attacks. Like, if you hold down the arrow button instead of just shooting it, it'll turn into, 3 arrow shots. Or if you hold down the bomb button, it'll turn into a bomb chew, and it'll go off in a straight path until it explodes instead of just like
that's
being
cool.
a bomb.
Yeah,
So you do like you are able to kind of power up that ability and be in that state longer if you want, and if that's how you want to play the game. But it is very like that also has the problem of just being like, oh well, we're just turning Zelda into Link for
that's
like
my
this,
feeling of
where
it.
it's like I actively avoided that because I was like, I want to try and do what I can. I mean, there was like one boss fight where I just kind of did entirely through dropping monster echoes and letting them do all of the work, which again, not the most engaging combat, but it was, I don't need to rely on being Link to do this fight either.
Yeah, that would be my feeling about that as well, is that I would much rather play into Zelda's inherent tool set, which in the past, like there's been, I think it's Twilight Princess where you fight the possessed Zelda, and she is has like a sword and stuff, and she's like fighting you with it, and that's cool as hell. Like that was such a cool moment of like, oh, Zelda can wreck my shit if I'm not careful, right? Mm-hmm. And so I love the idea of that. I think you also have I'm the internet's #1 Wind Waker hater, but I will say the idea of having an action kind of girl pirate version of Zelda is a very cool idea. I like that. I like the idea of an active participating Zelda has always been a higher desire for me. Mm-hmm. It's one of the reasons why I love Breath of the Wild / Tears of the Kingdom Zelda so much, is because even though like story-wise she's no longer there, she historically and accurately and portrayed in Age of Calamity is an active participating person and is more than just a princess to be saved. She's a leader to her people.
Yep.
And those moments are, for me personally, those moments are what I prefer out of my Zelda. So hearing this being I love the idea that she doesn't know who the boy in the tunic is. Mm-hmm. And so she's like, oh, like boy in a tunic, like help, like save me, but like is now lost. And it's like her journey to like fix the world now from whatever the problem is post Link's adventure. But Link is also trapped on the other side of wherever that is and is on his own adventure doing that too. It's the idea of doing that has always been very cool to me. I would love in the future to see a sort of dream drop distance from Kingdom Hearts, like this idea of not like the mechanic of it, because that was dumb bullshit sometimes, but the idea of like having to swap places, like you're on other sides of it, and so you're working together to try to like save the kingdom. Mm-hmm. I would love to see more of that sort of like tandem of a Link and Zelda game. I like that has always been a very deep desire of mine, especially for like a quote unquote sequel game. And in a way, we got that. Like that did technically happen in Tears of the Kingdom. We just didn't play through Zelda's part. It was done through story cutscenes. I would have loved that being her aspect of it. Get to know the sages of the past a lot better, and kind of like see her build out her crew. That would have been really cool to do in a more interesting way.
Yeah.
That being said, I'm really excited because Wisdom might end up being like a game I pick up at the end of the year.
I mean, like I'm done with it, so you're free to borrow.
Oh, that's right. You have a physical copy of it.
Yep.
I'd be happy to borrow it and play through it. Yep. Hey, this is a fun thing for us to be doing in a way, because it's like you
I
do
play
your
a
review,
game, beat a game, give it to you, and then in a month we'll hear your thoughts.
Yeah. Cool. Let's do that again. This is a little bit later for me with Unicorn Overlord. But yeah.
I mean, you hopped into other things.
Yeah.
I gave you Unicorn Overlord a while ago, and you jumped into Star Wars Outlaws first, or Astrobot.
Yeah.
least on one of those, the right choice.
Accurate, yes. Very
Speaking
much
of Unicorn Overlord, I'll throw it over to you for Unicorn Overlord thoughts. And just real quick, if you want, I was talking to Cameron about this the other day when we were recording that D Plus show. This is a game I reviewed back in episode 220 of that Nerdy Site show. And as I was thinking about the fact that Cameron was playing it, I was like, I don't remember most of this game. This was the epitome of like a game that I enjoyed in the moment, but like the story, the characters, there's just so many of them and so much story that like it all went in one ear out the other. I enjoyed like the playing and the mechanics of the game, but Cameron is going to go way deeper on any of the story stuff that I'm going to remember. So if you want my original thoughts, you can go back to episode 220. But otherwise, I'm going to hand the floor over to you, Cam, for your Unicorn Overlord thoughts.
Yeah, my initial thoughts, and this is also my
especially because you also came to this having played their previous big game, 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim.
Yep.
Yeah.
I've played that. I've played Odin Sphere. There's a couple games like I never played the dragon one with like very very famously like the extremely busty like witch.
Okay.
In that one, dragon something I don't know. Odin Sphere was the first one of their games that I picked up and played. It was just a really cool art style that I thought was really cool, and it's all based off of the Tale of the Nibelung. I definitely mispronounced that, but it's essentially you have Siegfried, you have Freya, you have
Dragon's Crown is the one.
Dragon's Crown was the one that I had not played. Yeah, that is one like a lot of memes at the time back in the day, and then the game came out and people were like, "Oh, it's actually really good." I never picked up and played it because I believe it was on PSP.
It was PS3 and PS Vita, and I believe I actually played a little bit of it on Vita because it was probably a like PlayStation Plus game at some point.
There you go. But yeah, it's overall the Odin Sphere is fantastic. If you like anybody out there has an opportunity to play it, it plays within a very fairy tale version of like the Germanic Norse mythology of like, you know, you have like Odin, you have the underworld, you have a lot of really cool stuff, and it tells a really multifaceted, multiple characters. The framing of it is you play as this little girl who's in an attic going through different storybooks, and each storybook ties into it, and then at the very end, it does this. It's an ensemble story, but they bleed into each other and over each other in really good and interesting ways. And if you decide, hey, I don't want to play this character anymore, you just go back to the title screen, go over to another book and pull it out and play that. It's very, very cool. 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim is one of, like, it was my number 2 game that year that it came out. It absolutely upended my entire, like, game of the year list. And it was just like, I'm like, well, I like these games. I'll give this one a shot. Like, Jason Schreier's Patrick Klepek, a lot of people are, like, raving about it. And I'm like, good indication. I enjoyed one of these games that I played before. I'll do this. Immediately fell in love with it. I think its biggest structural issue was that the combat was very detached from the rest of the game itself had combat missions and stuff in it, but they were found in the, like, they were split up into like a story mode and a combat mode, and it was done to essentially like keep it you couldn't move past certain story chapters until you beat the like requisite missions on the mission side of it. And so like that was fine. I enjoyed the heck out of it, but there was a very like, it was a very old school map version with like only a few kind of like interstitial frames showing the different mechs. And all the mechs were like very like varied and interesting and were very cool, but you only got like a very, like, you didn't get a full detailed fight breakdown like the way you do in like say Unicorn Overlord. And I think that combat wise, they've definitely improved the tactical system that they developed for 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim. I'm just going to say 13 Sentinels. For 13 Sentinels, they've definitely elevated the combat-wise in Unicorn Overlord. But in doing so, and also the fact, like, I've also played a lot of Fire Emblem games. This one has, and I mentioned it to you when you were telling me about it, I'm like, oh, this has a lot of shades of the first Fire Emblem story. The story of Marth and the Shadow Dragon and all that stuff going on with that. It's a, like, really deep touch on that. I will say, towards the end of this game with the story, it definitely like leaves that behind and tells its own story. But I will also say, 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim has what I felt was like already a large cast of characters. But their storytelling was so concise and how they kept things kind of locked in. to like what quote unquote time period some characters are from. What is going on with that for people who are like wondering, isn't that the one with the naked teenagers? Yes, and there's a very good reason why they're naked, and I can't tell you because it is the biggest spoiler of the game, and it is the most frustrating thing in the world. But this doesn't have any like baggage like that held onto it. This is also like story wise is a bit of a throwback to like Odin Sphere. I feel like definitely in like character designs, there's a lot of like there's like bestials who are beast people, elves and stuff, and so like that pulls deeper from like their dragon crown and Odin Sphere like art style, the fantastical art style, rather than like kind of like anime realistic like 80s 90s version of anime style that they use for 13 Sentinels. All that to say is that I am giving this game like an 8. It's a 7.5 to an 8, but I do bump it up to an 8 because the combat is really damn good. It has some faults in it. There are way too many different character classes because there's the standard ones for humans that you can play through, and then there's like these elf versions, and then there's some elf classes, and then there's some bestial classes and angel classes, and there's some crossover for those, but they're also very like standalone and unique on their own. That being said, so many classes, the angel classes, are held at the end of the game, and you don't get a lot of experience with them. Same thing with the bestial classes. By the time I cleared through Elfheim, which is like the third area they suggest you go to, by the time I cleared that, I was like, okay, cool. I know the mechanics of like all the different classes, everything. I have a pretty good idea of it, even the introduction to new ones in Dragonhold. By the time you get like the racial ones, like the vast different racial ones, it's like, I don't know what works for what anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
There are too many units. I have too many characters. I have I get like, they're like, hey, if you're doing like, I don't know if there's a permadeath option for the game on like an extra hard difficulty or not. If there is, then it makes sense why you have so many characters. But for most people who are playing this game, you're not dealing with that. And so you have way too many damn characters, which means each character only gets like a small amount of story that you unlock through like rapport, which is a cool system that they have, but there's too many characters to do the rapport system well. Everybody only has 3 scenes. Or sorry, they have 1 to 3 scenes. The scenes are interesting, but they're barely anything.
Yeah.
There's no strong relationship building outside of like a couple of characters, to the point where even the quote unquote canonical love interest, the one that you selected for yours, Scarlet, I felt like I didn't feel like tied to that because they have barely any interaction through the standard story as you're going through it. The game does a really good job of introducing some very unique and interesting characters, but there's just not a lot of substance to them.
Yeah.
It's very, and like, it's a cool world built out of the original idea of like a Fire Emblem type fantasy world that you have going on, the political intrigue, the like evil empire that's established itself. I think it does evil brainwashing, some of the best that I've ever seen, because there's like layers to the brainwashing. You can just be a brainwashed person, or you could be like possessed by evil spirits, or possessed by an individual powerful spirit, which are like his main 4 generals that you fight at the end in the last battle. It's done really cool. Thematically, it's very cool. I like a lot of the twists and turns about it. I loved doing the side content. I loved rebuilding the world, like getting to like get materials, gather them, rebuild a town. Oh, this city was ravaged. It has 3 tiers to it. I have to build off of that and rebuild that city. Like those aspects of it, I felt were extremely cool. I liked the aspects of like some of the side content of like, what does it mean to protect people? What does it mean? Like Elaine as a main character, especially like, does not get a lot of like, his stuff is very front loaded and very back loaded. He does not have a lot of character development in the middle. The main character, the blue-haired prince that you play.
Yeah, I think he's like, I think he's set up a lot in the beginning and then just kind of reinforced throughout. Like, this is a guy who is out to try and save his people and save the land. There's not much deeper beyond that, but like every place he goes to and all the people he meets, like that gets reinforced, and people are always like expecting some kind of ulterior motive from him, and he's like, no, I just want to help these people.
Yep. He has and also he's very honest about his selfish motivation of wanting to reclaim his kingdom. Like, it's but
it's selfish to reclaim the kingdom for the betterment of the people.
Yes. It's very like, if you have feelings about monarchies, this is a reinforcement of like, hey, monarchs are supposed to be good, considerate people. And one of the things about him is like, yeah, he's raised basically in hiding as a peasant on an island that technically belongs to another country even. So he's there as a refuge, or as a refugee. His best friends are, his best friend is literally the son of a fisherman who became friends with Elaine. Lex becomes friends with Elaine. And then Joseph, who is his father figure and knight commander, the head of he's a holy knight. Yeah. He's one of the only holy, quote unquote, holy knight classes. Has a unique class. I thought everybody was going to end up getting a unique class. Doesn't. It's just fine. Lets Joseph be a little special throughout the entire game, which is great because he's your level 20 starting unit. He's like your insurance policy, so you don't get a game over.
Yeah.
So
I think he starts at level 10.
For me, he started at level 20.
Huh. Okay.
Which I thought was crazy high. Granted, I was playing on normal, easy, standard difficulty.
Yeah.
But
okay. Well, maybe I'm trying to think because I thought like level 20 was where it caps out, but maybe I'm wrong.
No, it caps out at level 50.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, then yeah, you're right.
But I was not getting enough experiance to level him up at level 20.
He won't level up until much later in the game.
Yeah.
Because it is
about halfway through the game is when he starts leveling up.
Yeah.
Like actually leveling up. And so I love that. So yeah, Lex is like a son of a fisherman, and he mentions in his like compatibility with Elaine, the report, it is like I think I want to be a baker. It's like your bread is so hard. Yeah, but it's hard on the outside, but if you break it open, it's fluffy on the inside. And it's like
or he plays the odds. Like I like his scenes where it's like, it's like here's my loaf of bread, and they're like, oh my god, this is amazing, how did you do this? And then like somebody comes in, they're like, here are the 9 that failed and are rock hard and we have to just throw them away. He's like, hey, I got one good one.
Yeah, he's like, hey, I did 6, or it's like 6 or 9 or something like that, and he's like, I got one good one out of it. And it's like, yeah, he plays the odds. His stuff also, Lex has some interesting stuff happen in the main story too. Like he is very much your right hand, second in command type thing.
Yeah, it was interesting as the game goes on, identifying because it is that Fire Emblem, like, hey, you might have said no to any of these, other characters, and they might not have joined you or something like that. So that's part of why like none of them really get any kind of additional growth throughout the course of the game, is like they didn't want to have to figure out if this person is in the game, then do this, or all that stuff. So it's very like you have like a handful of like 10 or 12 characters that's like, these aren't yes or no characters. You will recruit these characters as the game proceeds, and they're the ones that will actually engage in the story and stuff like that.
Yep. I loved a lot of those characters. I will say, like the surprise of in Fire Emblem, the original Fire Emblem game, Marth has a sister who in this game they're using a cousin, Virginia, who is like a cut down somebody first, ask questions to their corpse later type of like a fighter, and fiery, passionate person, extremely competitive, awesome character. They like set her up where it could, like, she was literally came as like a refugee to the neighboring kingdom, and the king's whole plan was, I'll marry you to my oldest son, take back over the kingdom, and then unify our kingdoms. And then that does not go according to plan. And so she's kind of lost as like a royal refugee in a country that's also been like overthrown by the evil empire. And like she ran away. The running away didn't work. And so she's like been trying to like do a resistance for a while with Gilbert, who's the second prince, who I did the epilogue and they got married, which was really cool and sweet. They have a kid. And then I'm also going to put it out there. Some characters have really awesome epilogues. Like even the more characters who do not have a lot of like reports with people, it firmly like says, oh, they learned this on their journey. This is what they're going to do now. Mm-hmm. And it's awesome. One of my favorite ones was Auk, who's this like, his mom's dead, but he's the biggest mama's boy in the world. Like one of his things when he levels up is like, would you mind giving me some praise? He feels like he's useless as a magician, but he's like one of the most powerful like magic users in your army.
Oh yeah. Like I don't remember anything about his character. I remember using him, and he was one of my leaders for so many of my fights because, like I said, when we were talking about this the other night, I would always throw like a ranger leader and a magic leader out there to
do
like
the supports
to be the supports and help decimate an enemy before your main class goes in and does the fighting and stuff.
Yep. I did a little bit of a weird thing where I had the first ranger you get and the first magician you get, put them in my main party. Mm-hmm. And so I just had like this magical armored, like, and then eventually mounted party where I was just like, that could wreck shop for any enemy. And it was awesome, but it was too strong and they were getting way too over leveled from the rest of my parties. And so I had to start like reserving them.
Sure.
Doing that balancing, you don't want to get towards the end of the game. You have like one really strong party, but you're facing a fight where you have to be scattering out all your parties and then they get wasted by it. Classic mistake, especially young gamers make with games like this, where like love seeing, like I have vivid memories of getting to the very end of Final Fantasy VII and then having to set up a second party and they were all like level 30 something. Mm-hmm. It's like, oof.
I mean, you can more or less still even do that in this, but you're going to have a lot like, somebody in that like even super overpowered party is going to die and you're going to have to like use a lot more items to like keep them in the fight if you're just going to have that one, party moving around, where a much better option and game plan is to try and keep everybody more or less on even keel.
But I love his epilogue. So Ock's epilogue is he goes to his mother's grave, reads off all the accolades and achievements that he gained as like part of the rebellion and the Liberation Army. Reads them off, and then like that deals with his mama issues, and then he goes on to basically write the textbooks for the future of like basically even if you don't have a lot of magical talent, they have a much more like the future generations have a much more advanced magical society because of the work he does of like creating these very like basic textbooks that lets just about anybody who has any like even a smidgen of magical power become like a successful wizard. And there's that aspect of it that I'm like, I love that. I loved that Rolf, who is the one that you pointed out to me in our conversation, he's Claude from Three Houses, but in this game, and more serious, not as playful, still hot. And he is, he becomes like the Royal Ranger. Basically, he's in charge of making sure he's the forest ranger for the entire, for the Kingdom of Cornea. And it's like, that's a really cool thing. Some characters get super shafted with their ending.
I mean, you're talking about epilogues. I don't remember epilogues at all. Like, I don't remember if that was if that's a thing I just didn't go and seek out or what. But
it's the things that happen at the end of the game where they kind of like showcase the different locations and then the characters from your game. Okay. And it says what happens to them in the epilogue after that.
Yeah, I just don't recall that.
That's okay. That's okay. Most of them are kind of like nothings. Yeah. Some of them are nice. Some of them are like really sweet. Morden, who's the first like big hammer guy that you recruit, the big old one, he literally stops being a warrior and mercenary and becomes like a builder and architect. And when he dies, they named like one of the roads in the city that he used to be in charge of is named after him because of it's like the architecture on it is beautiful. And so they name it after. Like there's some sweet moments and touching things like that. I will say I romanced
you can't remember her name. Just describe her.
It's Brancia. Brancia.
That doesn't help me. So even remembering her name.
This is what I'm going to say. She's the dark-haired, one-eyed former general who joins your side.
Gotcha.
And your whole rapport with her as Elaine are you're building up like a relationship with her, and she goes, "Well, we can trust each other because we're strangers."
And her she's the one who her brother's like one
Travis.
Of
he's
thief,
the rogue.
The thief. Yeah, you start with or whatever. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. And so her whole thing is like you can't trust me because I've betrayed my country and I betrayed the enemy, and now I'm with you. Like you can't trust me. And over time, their last rapport leaves them on like a really rough note. But the engagement scene with the Ring of the Maiden with her this is what I did. I saved the game, made a couple extra saves just in case I saved over it on accident, and I went through every single female rapport that I had at the time, and I had most of them.
Okay.
Spent like an hour and a half doing it. A lot of fun. Some of them not that interesting. They're all very much like some personalized stuff about the character, but overall it's just two people looking at each other for like some distance, maybe not so much distance away, and that's it. There's like 3 or 4 that have like actual unique animations to their things, and only one of them ends in like a hot makeout session. and that's the one with Barenziga. And that's why I was like, this is it. Also, Elaine says some stuff that's just like smooth talking, good stuff, good lines. Like, you are strikingly beautiful in your armor, but you'll be even more beautiful in a dress of white on our wedding. Like, plays right into it. Ends with her blushing, and then her, like, the two of you uniting and making out. That's not the only one that ends in a makeout. I apologize. The other one is the one makeout session that ends with your cousin. The Sweet Home Alabama pairing, as I like to call it. Our Sweet Home Cornea pairing on that one. Because it's like, she literally says, I used to look at you like a brother, but now I look at you so much more. It's like, this is weird. This one's weird. Also, one of the interesting ones with unique animations is the one with like the witch who turned herself young. Mm-hmm. If you choose her, it's like, it's really cute. And then you are reminded that this woman is old enough that she served in the court of your grandfather.
Yeah.
And so it's also like weird, but okay. I almost went with her because that one was actually like a really sweet one. And their relationship is actually really cute. Despite like the like December, May fly like thing going on. Sure. Also the elves had some interesting ones too, but overall Barenziga is, she's my queen. She gets shafted hard. That epilogue at the very end after the credits roll, and it's like your romantic epilogue, it's dog shit. It's absolute dog shit. It makes zero sense, and it's bullshit, and I hated it. And I was like, that's dumb as hell. This was dumb as hell. You play off like they're in love, and it's very much like seeing through her defensive mechanisms of being like, she tells you can't trust her because she is worried. She has also been possessed by an actual like historical spirit from Zenoria, and that's like a general that you fight at the end of the game. Like, one of those possessed her, and so like she's on top of being like brainwashed. It's like, I was possessed and it was terrible. So there's all of that going on with her, and it's unique and cool. And then they give her the most dog shit ending, where it's like, she wasn't a good queen, so she went off to like rejoin the mercenary band. And I'm like, that's bullshit. That's fucking bullshit, and I hated it. Anyway. Spoilers for that, I guess. I don't know.
Sure. So you spent a ton of time seeing all of those different variations. How much did you do in terms of like side quests and like?
I did almost all the side quests.
Okay. Because I remember I platinumed the game, so I did do everything there was to do in the game.
There's 150 side quests. I got to over 120 of them. Okay. The ones I didn't do were the treasure maps, and by the time I beat the game, but in the post game, I did go back and beat the Colosseum. Mm-hmm. I forgot about the Colosseum. Mm. And so like there's a character that I didn't recruit.
Yeah. I liked that character a lot.
She's cool. Especially like the turn in her fight after you beat her, and then like the super fight that happens after that is so cool. Mm. Really awesome stuff. Overall, had a really great time with it. This game is really good. I think mechanically this game is extremely sound. Just too much of some stuff. And then not enough of like good, solid character development throughout the game. Not for Elaine's good. The other characters, because it's like, do you use them? Do you not? A lot of like the variants of like who joined you, who doesn't join you, impacts, like you mentioned, heavily the dichotomy of story and character interaction. Yeah. And it really hurts it in a way.
How much did you get in the weeds on like equipping your party and like figuring out their, I'm gonna say gambits for the lack of a better term because I don't recall what term they use, but like I'm thinking of the gambit system from Final Fantasy 12.
Yeah, the tactic system that they use. I got deep into the Duffy on that.
Okay, I just always did like auto. I would go through when I'd get a whole bunch of like every hour or two, I'd be like, oh, I've gotten like a whole bunch of equipment from the last handful of battles, so I would just go through and be like, auto equip, like go through the lines of all of my my like regular party members, because we touched on this, by the end especially, I had like 50 characters that I was using because I had all 10 of my squads maxed out to 5 units apiece kind of thing, and I still had 15 or 20 people that weren't ever getting any kind of play. And they're just there, and I'm like, absolutely. All right, well, if for some reason I ever need you, I guess I'll go ahead and give you like the bare bones, equipment here. But I just never. I was like, this is too in the weeds. I'm gonna trust that. Like there would be a couple things where like I would do auto equip, and I'm like, no, I want that character to have this very specific weapon or something like that. So I'd go in and do like a little bit of like manual tweaks, but for the most part, it was just like, I'm gonna trust the game to give me the best outfit because I don't have the patience or time to
Yeah.
to go in and do all that manipulation.
I had both the patience and the time, and I fully optimized my parties as much as I possibly could, including going into their tactics. Because sometimes, for example, one of the best equipments for sorcerers is the sorcerer gauntlets. Problem is that turns your sorcerer into a punching sorcerer, which is cool until you realize, oh, hey, I'm not clearing out enemies like I could be in a single battle because you're doing a single focused attack and not Blizzard, where you basically freeze all my enemies and then I get free shots and kill them. So at first I started doing tactics and I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to unequip the item. But then there was another magic using character where I was like, hey, I'm just going to give you this. And all of a sudden they're doing a lot more impact in the fights because they did not have as powerful of a wand or like staff or whatever. Very useful because it basically converts your magic power into a physical power on top of also any additional physical power you already have. So you're doing crazy amounts of damage, but it's only to a single enemy. And the best part about magic is you can clear out entire waves of enemies. Yeah. The heavy armor enemies in particular. That's also like why I like to have varied squads. I like to have some that had like I always wanted once I unlocked 5 members, I always wanted 2 frontliners to do like tank damage. And then I wanted 3 people in the back, either a healer, magic user. It would be a healer or a magic user for the most part, a heavy physical DPS, and then a heavy range DPS if I could, or a flying DPS instead of that. So instead of having a bow person, I would have a Griffin Rider or Wyvern Rider.
Sure.
Or I would have one of them was like my Knights of the Ashen Blue party because I had both Clive and a Dane. In the front line for this party, and then the back lane was a healer, another mounted knight, like a sacred knight, basically the ones who like could like nullify magic, and then sorry, what was the last one on that one? Oh, that was a soldier. Like you had Chloe, the soldier, on that one, so she was doing a lot of support and then like some spear work as well. Good stuff. Really had a great time with it all. But overall, like, yeah, this is an 8 game. I don't think it reaches the heights of like, it might be in my top 10 of the year, depending on how things shake out by the end of the year. But, overall, like this is definitely like where that's ranking for me is like, it's an 8.
Gotcha. Cool.
Not great game.
All right. Then with our game talk out of the way, I'm going to segue over into some movie talk. So I'll start with Saturday Night, which I went and saw this weekend. This is the like behind the scenes of the very first Saturday Night Live episode. Fun fact about me: there was a period of my time where I got super into Saturday Night Live stuff. So I have like the Live from New York book, and I have a ton of Saturday Night Live like collections and videos, and I have like the first season on DVD and stuff like that.
Go figure.
I did sketch comedy, did sketch writing and stuff in college for the ASU sketch comedy troupe for a year and a half, 2 years there. And so, yeah, I was a big like sketch comedy fan. And so I was intrigued by this to see in terms of like what it would have. The thing I was telling Cameron before we started recording, like, everybody who's in this movie shows up and they are doing great work. Like, great performances pretty much all around. Notably, Gabrielle LaBelle as Lorne Michaels. This is very much like his movie. He is the absolute focal point, of course. The biggest issue I have with the movie is its script/structure. It is framed to be the 90 minutes leading up to that first episode of Saturday Night Live. And so, as a result, they're trying to cram in introducing the audience to, and I say introducing to, a lot of times you barely get a character's name, like in terms of like introduction or something like that. So a lot of this is like, hey, if you know Saturday Night Live history and you know those early years of Saturday Night Live, outside of like the core cast, like you might not, like, you'll be able to pick up who people are if you really know it. You'll be able to like, oh, yep, there's Franken and Davis kind of thing, there's Don Pardo kind of like. But the movie very specifically does not like spend time getting to know a lot of these characters because there are just too many characters to try and meet in 90 minutes shot quote unquote in real time, where it's like the movie occasionally will cut back to like, 10:14 ticking over to 10:15 or something like that.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the biggest way in which this movie suffers is it's locked into that, for lack of a better term, gimmick for the framing of this film, and it just can't effectively introduce the characters, introduce the conflict, introduce like the tension between the cast itself, between the cast in the studio, between Lorne and like NBC, or vice versa. It's just trying to do way too much in too little time. Whereas like, and I'll give a tip of the hat to Dan Merle's kind of critique on the film. Like if the first half of the movie wasn't locked into that kind of time frame and just kind of let like us meet and get introduced to these characters and kind of their, wants, needs, central conflict and stuff, and then segued into, okay, and now we're in the like 30 minutes till, prime time kind of beat. Maybe that would have been like a possible option here, but here it's playing very fast and loose with like they take a lot of liberties, and like the example I used with Cameron was like, oh, they portray it as though Chevy Chase is made like the host of Weekend Update 5 minutes before the show starts, or they find like a head writer at a bar down the street 20 minutes before the show starts, and so like they're very highly fictionalizing just how much of that show was last minute, and there are definitely like real tensions that are kind of addressed and portrayed here in the film, but like it is very much done so in some cases unrealistic expectations, or like it would have been an interesting thing to like have. I mean, the articles that I went to kind of after the fact to be like, what in here is real versus not. And like a lot of it is like, did this really happen? No, but this kind of thing did happen. Or here's what really happened that they're like playing off of here. But overall, like it's still, it was a very fun time. I would probably put it as like a 7.5, like a that good film. But it has some like 9 performances. It has like some amazing performances. Again, like the Gabriella Bell as Lorne Michaels, really great. A lot of kind of the performers portraying the original cast of Corey Michael Smith as Chevy Chase, Lamorne Morris as Garrett Morris, Dylan O'Brien as Dan Aykroyd. A lot of them are great. Another issue though, and this again falls to like just how many characters and how many stories they're trying to pour in here. A lot of the female characters, like Jane Curtin, Gilda Radner, Lorraine Newman, they kind of all get short shrift, as unfortunately so often happens. This is very much like a boys' club kind of story, and so like Jane Curtin has like this was Kim Matula as Jane Curtin has like one scene that she really has.
That's
like,
crazy.
And in like she has a scene with Lamorne Morris, who's playing Garrett Morris, no relation. But the two of them are having this like, or Garrett's arc over the course of the movie is like, what am I doing here? I'm a published playwright. All these other people are like underground comedy scene people. I've been doing stuff on Broadway. Like, why am I here? What's my role? What's my, like, having kind of a night of existential crisis about like his role to play in the show, which again is like, that didn't happen the night of. He definitely, had some questions and wonders about what he was doing, but it was, over the course of, in the weeks leading up to the show or over the course of that season and stuff like that. But like they're having this conversation about like, why am I here? Why are you here? And like Jane Curtin kind of has like a scene where she's just kind of like going through a whole bunch of different voices and playing a bunch of different like female stereotype characters and being like, I'm here because I can do all of that. And that's about it. That's all she has in the movie.
That's so
apart
sad.
from like the recreations of a couple of sketches that they do as like, you know, the dress rehearsal leading into the show as they're trying to put everything together. That's another thing. Like
what about Gilda Radner? So I should mention Gilda Radner is like a patron saint in the Abbott household of female comedy. Like my family adores her. I love Gilda Radner.
I will say Ella Hunt as Gilda Radner is served the best of the three.
Okay.
But a lot of that is also stemming from the thing that I was about to segue into is like they do they celebrate a lot of like that first season sketches, even if they weren't that first night, where it'll be like the scene I'm thinking of in particular is they have a shot that is the iconic, like I want to say it was like done as a short video kind of thing of Gilda Radner watching Jim Belushi or John Belushi in the B outfit skating in 30 Rock, like skating in the ice skating rink. Like they have that play out as like it's really happening in the, you know, the night before, you know, 15 minutes before showtime. Like John's out there trying to clear his head, trying to figure out if he actually wants to do this. He hates being in this Bumblebee outfit, but he's out there skating.
Ice skating.
And Gilda is out there, you know, talking about their futures and you know, do you ever get nostalgic for, you know, a moment while you're living in it kind of thing, which I believe is one of those very iconic early season 1 kind of things. So like there are beats like that. They also, you know, make reference to, they have people working behind the scenes on like the blood effect that they're going to use for when they have Dan Aykroyd play Julia Childs and cut off her hand kind of thing. And or they, you know, they have they do like they rehearse the sketch that in the pantheon of this particular portrayal gets cut and moved into a later show. But it's the iconic early sketch where Dan Aykroyd comes out in like very, very short skirts and basically gets catcalled by the 3 women in the cast. Like they do that sequence, and it's played for extra, you know, ironic laughs in the context of everything, because like all of the catcalling shitty Teamster crewmen and union workers are watching, you know, all of this happen, completely oblivious to the fact that this is how they've been talking to the women in the show, in the cast all night long kind of thing. And like those, like the women are objectifying Dan kind of in the sequence, and all the guys are loving it and thinking it's hilarious without any kind of sense of like self-awareness. Yeah. So, so like that's like Gilda gets some stuff in that, and the Jane Curtin character gets a little bit in that too. But for the most part, like the male cast members are given much more of like a little story arc over the course of it. Like Chevy Chase gets an arc. Garrett Morris, like I said, is kind of having this like, you know, crisis of like why I'm here. Dan Aykroyd was seeing Lorne Michaels' then wife, but they were kind of like they were estranged kind of thing. And so there's like some tension between Dan Aykroyd and Rosie, while also Dan Aykroyd was like a little bit of a player, and so he kind of does the same kind of like pickup line to Gilda and to Lorraine Newman and to Rosie Schuster and stuff, and you just see it kind of like, you know, pile on over the course of the movie. But yeah, like they all have much more like clear cut, and John Belushi has very much like a, hey John, like we need you to sign your contract, which is one of like the, oh, that was a real thing that was like he finally signs his contract like 5 minutes before air, and it's very much like is he gonna actually do the show or not kind of, you know, it, like he's at, you know, tensions at an all-time high, you know, in the lead up to the debut. There's some fun, I would say, like oddly enough, apart from Rosie, who was another like producer with Lauren kind of on the show, writer with Lauren on the show, Rosie Schuster. Like one of the big things is like, how do you want to be credited? Rosie Schuster, Rosie Michaels kind of thing, and ultimately Rosie Schuster, and that's one of those other things where it's like that was never really in conflict. Yes, they were married, but like they had like they were pretty much
Done by
in a
that
very
point.
open marriage by this point
Yeah.
in time.
We mentioned they were like separated at that point, right?
Yeah. Like they're still legally married, but yeah, they're like, again, Rosie is in a very open relationship. Like they talk about in the movie, Lauren's like, "So you going home with Dan tonight?" kind of thing, or
Yeah.
But apart from them, the female character that probably gets the most play in the movie is the like broadcasts and standards lady who's like having to sign off and verify the the ultimate script. I'm trying to find her because she's definitely like one of those. Oh, I recognize her. I've seen her in other things kind of actress. Not gonna bother trying to find it now, but yeah, like she's very much the like person that gets like the most kind of extra attention and care in this of the like the female characters because of the combative nature between her and like the all of the innuendo things that the people are sliding in there, or her like confronting George Carlin being like, just so you know, I'm the person that will be pushing the delay button and pushing the censor button kind of thing if you try and like curse in your monologue and stuff like that. So yeah, shout out to her.
That's awesome.
Let's see. Catherine Curtin, playing Joan Carbuncle, is the actress's name, and she's in Stranger Things. She's in I don't know. She's been in a ton of other things that I've seen and recognized her from. Orange is the New Black. That's who she is the female prison guard in Orange is the New Black. That
Okay, yeah.
If you recall that show. But yeah, so
Very little, but yes, I do remember
she
her.
has like she's constantly pushing against Michael O'Donoghue as like the writer and being like, what's a golden shower? And then they go into like detailing what a golden shower is. Of course, how do you not know? And Lauren's just kind of like, how many of those did you slide in there? And he's like, oh, 40. So it's but she is like, I know what blue balls are, and then somebody's like, I bet you do. So like, yeah, she is very much like portrayed as like, I've been doing this for many years. I'm the good upstanding Christian woman that is saving America's television audience from the corruption of your New York sensibilities and stuff like that. And
that's fantastic. Okay,
Yeah.
so she's the wet blanket that gets put on stuff basically to like throw a wrench into things.
Yeah. Similarly, there is some fun interplay. Obviously, Andy Kaufman, a very notable part of that very first episode of SNL, doing his Mighty Mouse bit. As well as, of course, Jim Henson had the Muppets on there the first season, but famously there was tension between the Muppets because Jim Henson's team was not writing for the Muppets. They were just performing, and the writers like O'Donoghue did not want to write for the Muppets. So like there's a lot of, it's been in the trailers and stuff, but it's like Jim Henson coming down being like, yeah, the writers on the 17th floor hung Big Bird and I don't necessarily appreciate that. And then like the writer comes in, he's like, man, I heard about Big Bird, autoerotic asphyxiation, huh? Wow, you never know.
That's so messed up.
Yeah.
That's so messed up.
And so there's tension of like, like Lauren and Jim kind of having those conversations, and Lauren being like, oh, what, did you not like the pages they gave you? And Jim constantly being like, they haven't given us pages. I get that you don't like us, you don't want us here, but like we are here, so give us something for our characters to do. But the same actor ends up playing both of those. Nicholas Braun ends up pulling double duty.
From Succession.
As Andy Kaufman and Jim Henson. And he does a great job in both parts. He is fully in like Andy Kaufman, like is in character the whole time. From like he basically like the movie starts with Andy Kaufman showing up and Lauren kind of like bringing him in, kind of getting him in, and he's just there in that iconic, tan suit, holding his record player, and just kind of like wandering aimlessly the halls of 8H and Studio 60 and stuff. Or no, Studio 60 was on the Sunset Strip. 8H Hall 8H 30 Rock. So yeah, he's like, you constantly see him, and they do a lot of like, oh, there's background gags and references to all sorts of like nonsense and silly things, but like a lot of them are like dedicated diehard SNL references. Like, oh, there's like always a llama in, backstage for some reason, kind of, in a sketch that's never actually going to air or whatever. There's also who is he? Where's the actor? Somebody, Nicholas Podany does a good job as he's basically there as Billy Crystal, who was supposed to be in kind of the opening, like doing doing like some monologue or like some of his stand-up routine kind of stuff. But because the movie is constantly like, hey, Lauren, you got to cut this down from a 3-hour show to a hard 90 minutes. Basically, ultimately, Billy Crystal, like we see him and Valerie Bromfeld constantly kind of like backstage trying to determine how they're gonna lay it down with Lauren of like, hey, we need to know how much time you're giving us to go and do the show. My bit's 6 minutes, I can do it in 4, but you got to give me 4 minutes. And Lauren comes back and is like, can you do it in 2? All I have is 2. And Billy Crystal's like, no, I can't do it in 2. I can't even get set up in 2. And then and he's like, well, I'm sorry, it's not going to work out. How about you? Can you do it in 2? And this, like, the person who's been thick as thieves with Billy the whole time is like, yeah, I can do it in 2. Like immediately throws him under the bus, and she makes it on to that first show kind of thing. And so, but there's like kind of those little backstage nuggets
Tiffs
of,
and whatnot, yeah.
like what was going on, and it's not like there's no animosity there or anything like that. It's just like the reality of the situation. J.K. Simmons comes in as Milton Berle, and is like deliciously terrible, and like just constantly shitting on all this. Willem Dafoe is in here as a big antagonist. Like, oh, is he going to be the an NBC person that basically says, no, you're not going live. We're going to throw to a taped rerun of Johnny Carson instead. And he's in there playing. Oh, where are you, Willem Dafoe? Where are you in this cast list? Oh, you're somewhere in here. Like head of talent relate, Dave Tevitt, of like talent relations, kind of person. Dave Ebersol's in here running around with Lauren for a lot of it. Portrayed by, where did you go? I just saw you here somewhere. Dick Ebersol, sorry. Cooper Hoffman plays Dick Ebersol, who's basically trying to be like the money man, and like it's very much like he's the money man wet blanket to Lauren's like creative rebel kind of thing. But yeah, like ultimately they all do a great job knocking it out of the park, but it is again just so much. They're throwing so many things at the wall that there's just not enough time to let any of them like sit and breathe, while also like, hey, yeah, here's a moment where we're going to throw to, the musical guests or something like that, and let them have their sound check, or let's try and rehearse, the set that we, what sketch can we rehearse right now with who we've got? Okay, let's do this one. How can we make this quick change work? Okay, let's do this. And it's just like,
cool.
It is fully trying to play into the madhouse nature of running a 90-minute live show every week. Mm-hmm. But it in trying to like replicate that own madness, it just kind of does a disservice to the pieces of the puzzle around it. It doesn't give the like, especially like, we all know that, yeah, it went off, and while there may have been, things that go wrong, I went back and watched actually the opening of that first episode last night after watching this, and like Don Pardo being like, and the not for prime time ready players, or what, instead of the not ready for prime time players, like he messes up that introduction and they have a little allusion to that being like, a name thrown out about these characters 10 minutes before showtime. Like, your people aren't ready for prime time. Like, yeah, there's a lot of fun in here and a lot of like deep cut Easter eggs and surface level Easter eggs for SNL classic era fans. But it's also like, if you don't know a lot of that stuff, I don't know if you get as much out of this movie, or you're just going to be like I knew the names Dick Ebersol and some of that stuff, and I knew like Michael O'Donoghue as a name. I knew a lot of the names being thrown around, but I don't have like a great like connection to those characters or anything like that. So like when the movie doesn't really do much more than give lip service to a name, it's like, well, that's not really a character. That's more a cameo than anything, really, at this point. Of like, okay, you've told me that that's who this person is, but you're not giving me any sequences or any scenes or anything to there's no know who they are, what they're doing here. So, okay, cool. You threw in a name like Paul. Was it Paul? What's his name? Paul Schaefer. Like, you see a guy that is very clearly Paul Schaefer from appearance. Kind of there running around backstage doing music stuff. And sure enough, that is absolutely who he was. But it's like, oh, that's just we see a guy that very much looks like Paul Schaefer. It's like, he doesn't really add a ton extra to the story or the inner workings of the movie.
Yeah. But he's there, like filling out background, basically.
Yeah.
For like, you would expect Paul Schaefer to be there, so he's there.
Yep. Yeah, okay. Pretty much. But it is like so like notable that he's there, and the camera lingers on him enough times. It's like, that's got to be Paul Schaefer, right? Yeah. And again, like I don't associate Paul Schaefer with SNL. I associate Paul Schaefer with Letterman.
Yeah.
More than anything, but like that's very like it was very much. Oh, that's very clearly who this guy is, right? So yeah, lots of stuff like that. You also see like hints of who these people will grow into, like Chevy Chase, very ego filled throughout this entire thing and butting heads with the other cast members and very much being like
I was going to ask you about that. I was like,
I'm going to be the star of this show, right?
Yeah.
He kind of gets like he has an elevator ride with the Willem Dafoe character who's like the head of public relations, and basically is like, yeah, give us a call and we'll set you up with like a job in Burbank. Johnny Carson's not going to be around forever. Kind of like teasing or planting this idea in Chevy Chase's head that Chevy Chase is going to be the next Johnny Carson kind of thing. And he also butts heads with Milton Berle in here.
Absolutely, yeah.
With Milton Berle very much like just absolutely shitting on him. That kind of like is almost the like, Batman origin story of like, the reason Chevy Chase is a dick is because he never wants to be treated like that again, kind of thing. It's like, all right, no, I think Chevy Chase was probably just also an egomaniac.
Yeah.
Going all the way back here.
Famously an egomaniac.
Yeah. So, ultimately, like,
they didn't have. This is the first episode, so Bill Murray's not there because that.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
because those stories between those two are legendary.
Yeah. Bill Murray starts, I believe, season 2.
For anybody out there who's wondering, one of the tamer stories is the time Bill Murray pulled out like a switchblade on Chevy Chase because they were arguing about whose Coke was whose. That's a tame story about those two. They fucking hated each other.
Sure. And like, in this, like, Chevy and John Belushi go to blows at one point.
Absolutely,
and like we see that kind of stuff.
Chevy Chase, there's not a lot of people Chevy Chase hasn't gotten into blows with. I think.
Sure.
What's his name? I should know his name. Because he played Chevy Chase in like another movie too, but he was on him in Community.
Joe McHale.
Joe McHale, yeah. Joe McHale has like the best stories.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where because he's like, yeah, we used to get in fights with him. Like everybody at one point got into a fight with him, and they're like, oh, you guys argued. It's like, no, we got into a physical fist fight with him. Every single person at least once did that. So when these stories come out about like these one big moments, like Dan Harmon drunk bashes Chevy Chase in front of his family. Or there's like, you don't understand. That's just what slipped out. He goes, that kind of stuff happened all the time. Like, and they're like, but you like it? I don't like him, but like, I love him. Like, it's very much like people don't like Chevy Chase. They either love him or they hate him. And sometimes both.
Yeah.
Like, so that is interesting for me. It's like, how much did they get leeway to just show how much of an asshole Chevy Chase is?
I mean, like, again, because this isn't a movie about Chevy Chase's 90 minutes beforehand.
It's everybody's.
He's an asshole for the time we see him in this movie.
Okay.
And like they frame it so much as like he's there with his fiance or something, and his fiance keeps wrangling her way into more sketches, and then Milton Berle's hitting on his fiance and stuff like that. And that's, Chevy Chase, gets into not fisticuffs, but basically like gets into a dick measuring contest with Milton Berle in that moment with J.K. Simmons as Milton Berle kind of thing. And so it's
that's
like,
fantastic. I'm excited. Okay, I want to see this movie.
Yeah, it's definitely a fun, like, if kind of takedown of Chevy and like his arrogance and stuff like that.
Incredible actor, incredible comedic actor, but like yeah.
But yeah, overall, again, like, great performances all around. Like, Corey Michael Smith as Chevy Chase does a great job, and it's never like I didn't ever feel like they were being caricatures of these real performers being characters kind of thing. It felt like, oh, like you've done a great job of capturing their mannerisms and their style of talking and movement and stuff like that, and are able to kind of segue that into the characters. In particular, Dylan O'Brien as Dan Aykroyd might be the best of that, because
that doesn't surprise me. He's an incredible actor.
We see him do a lot of like behind the scenes Aykroyd stuff, as well as like Aykroyd in kind of sketch moments. That was a lot of fun. So yeah, overall a very fun time, because I have a lot of that like extra SNL lineage knowledge, but I also fully expect that like a non-SNL, like, this isn't going to win over people that don't know SNL or something like that.
Yeah,
this isn't going to be like the introduction that you need to know what those early days of SNL were.
I really like that movie. I'm going to start watching Saturday Night Live. Yeah, that's not going to happen. Like, for me, this movie is such a weird anomaly that this movie even got made.
Yeah.
Because this, like, it's about a bygone era of a show that struggles to find an audience outside of clips on like YouTube and TikTok and Reels and stuff. It's like Saturday Night Live is still alive, it's still going, it's still but the prestige over time has kind of like it's off and on. I feel like
it's always been off.
Yeah,
and on.
It's always been off. And
that's
on,
the thing. It's like, this has always been off. I mean, like, the big thing. This is, as we're going into and SNL's 50th anniversary season just started this year.
Yeah.
And like the big thing, we're recording this Sunday. The big thing from last night. Oh, The Lonely Island came back and did a new fresh digital short. Obviously, like, Maya Rudolph and Andy Samberg are playing Kamala Harris and Doug Harris in this run of shows. So like, Andy being back, they came back and did a fresh digital short, which is making the rounds on social media and stuff today, as a lot of the Lonely Island stuff did a decade ago. So it's very much like, it comes and goes. You'll get like, oh, everybody's firing on all cylinders of this cast versus people who aren't. And I think that's just part of that's just the nature of that show. It's a star making vehicle for, a number of people, but also, a number of people do SNL and they never really do anything else. They don't segue that into a broader career outside of that. But for people that do, like, this did make the careers of Chevy, of John Belushi, of Aykroyd. Like, I would say of that original cast, like, Lorraine Newman and is maybe the one who didn't do a ton after that. But like, Jane Curtin obviously was in Third Rock from the Sun, all those years later, and still, pops back in and makes appearances on, anniversary or 5-timer club things and that kind of stuff.
She's a fantastic actress. She's incredible. Yeah.
Garrett Morris, has done a ton kind of post-career. And then some of it just also becomes like in the waves of celebrity. Obviously, like, John Belushi and Gilda Radner would have been done so much more had their lives not been cut as short as they were.
Yeah.
So of that original kind of crew, like, it was a murderer's row of people that did, amazing things kind of following up from that. And you have that with so many generations of things, even the weak generations of SNL. Like, you think of like Robert Downey Jr. was on Saturday Night Live.
Yep.
Julia Louis-Dreyfus was on
Yep.
Saturday Night Live. Both of them for like one season or half of a season or something like that. They were in the bad season that everybody kind of points to as the bad season of SNL. But the show's still going strong 50 years later. And I think that's why this movie exists and why it was like made and timed very specifically to kind of hit at the same time as the 50th anniversary.
That makes sense.
Like, hey, yeah, like, again, you talk about like it doesn't do what it did. In the recent Emmys, they had a whole segment kind of with like a little SNL reunion of like Kristen Wiig and Seth Meyers shitting on Lorne for the number of Emmys that Lorne has lost. Like, we just found out that Lorne has lost over 200 Emmys for SNL. And then finally, and they're all like, it's okay, Lorne, you still do you keep pushing on. And then Seth is like, yeah, guys, but he's also won like 79 Emmys. Like, SNL's doing just fine, everybody.
Yeah.
Like, so fully playing into that, perception of that, like, everybody always says like, oh, SNL isn't as good as it once was.
It's true.
And people are always like pointing to oh yeah, when I was growing up in the early 90s, I was watching, the Farley and Mike Myers and Phil Hartman era of SNL. And then, a decade later you get the Kristen Wiig and the Will Ferrell era and then you get like the Lonely Island and Amy Poehler and Tina Fey, and like there are plenty of like winners that the fact that like Kenan Thompson has been on the show for like 20 plus years at this point.
It's true.
Is what, like, I remember Daryl Hammond or Tim Meadows being like the long running cast members. And so the fact that like Kenan Thompson has now like, put an extra almost decades worth of episodes on top of the number, like the most done episode. Like, I don't think anybody's ever going to have the longevity that he has done on that show.
And like the breadth of Kenan Thompson is a tour de force of his own. His impression, like his library of impressions is insane.
I mean, sure. I don't think of him as a great impressionist though.
No, it's not. He's a great character actor though.
He's a great character actor, but like,
that's kind of what I believe.
Steve Harvey is not anything like Steve
That's true.
Harvey.
Sorry, I
or
apologize.
Charles Barkley or Shaq are not those characters. He's just doing he's not a Dana Carvey impressionist.
No.
He's the guy they had for this because they for so long would only have like one or two black actors, on a season. So like, we're going to do something with Charles Barkley. All right, Kenan, this is going to be you. And I think he would probably be the first to say like, all right, I'm not a good impressionist, but sure, I'll do. Like,
I think that's where he was more, and like
in terms of like good impressions he has, I would point to his Bill Cosby or his like Bill Cosby family of things.
Yes.
Obviously, he was Fat Albert in the live action Fat Albert movie and does that very good. But yeah, so many of his other things, it's like, all right, the makeup or the wig is doing most of the work.
That's fair.
And he's
you got me on that.
Barely trying to do an impression of.
I think for me, I do think it's more of like his caricature, like his character acting. Whether it's like he's like the go-to person to be the host of a game, like fake game show.
Yeah,
he is,
and like even that is like, you have eras where like Bill Hader was that person for forever. But yeah, now it's like, Kenan is the go-to host because he's going to be the straight man that does the setup kind of thing.
Yep, he's fantastic. There's so many things I do love. Like I loved him from Kenan and Kel, obviously.
Mm-hmm. It's fascinating. Like, because even before this, it was like he was on All That, so he was on the kids version of SNL so he's been doing sketch comedy for like 40 of his 50 years on Earth or whatever. Pretty much, yeah. He's like, so yeah, he's awesome. No, and even like I look at like Beck Beckett and like that era, like the Bo Bennett.
So sorry, Bo Bennett. What did I say? Beck Bennett?
I think you said Beck Beckett.
Beck Beckett. It's Bo Bennett, right? Like I'm okay, yeah. Bo Bennett and like that era. It's also like the rise of like Pete Davidson and everything. Like you have those couple of years that I look back and I'm like, I still love those clips of those great sketches, but it is like you said, it's hit and miss. But I think you have like eras where like the digital entertainment era of when they went hard on YouTube clips, SNL did. NBC broke those out, put them on YouTube because they realized that's where people's eyeballs are.
Yeah.
One of the only like TV programs to do that outside of late night hosts. And even
I've been watching the Lonely Island and Seth Meyers podcast, or not watching. I'm listening to the Lonely Island and Seth Meyers podcast, which is the Lonely Island, Seth Meyers getting down and going through, starting with like their first digital short, kind of going through short by short and talking about like that era of SNL. And yeah, a lot of those early things like Chronicles of Narnia and Natalie Rapp's,
dude, the Chronicles of Narnia
didn't go on to, like, those were their big breakouts, but they didn't go on to YouTube at first because NBC wasn't doing that. Like they would maybe go on to like the NBC.com, app
the
or something
pre-Hulu
like
days.
that.
Yeah.
And then other people were uploading them to YouTube and
getting millions of views
until NBC would like issue a copyright takedown or something like that, until finally they, get into an era where they would start putting those. But even that, like, they weren't, a lot of times they're talking in especially in those earlier shorts, they weren't thinking about like there's one that they did in episode 4 not too long ago. It was like, it was a Zach Braff episode, was the host, and it's a video that's not on YouTube because it has like a Kelly Clarkson song or something like that. So like NBC didn't clear it for, like, they cleared it for air, but they didn't clear it for like digital distribution and YouTube and stuff like that. So like, it's funny now because they're reading the comments on those old videos as they go in and like record the episode on it, and seeing people comment on the YouTube videos about listening to the podcast and stuff like that. But yeah, all of this to say, like, they talk about in some of those episodes, like, if you had 2 great sketches in an episode of SNL, like that's a win. Like, those were the wins, and Seth Meyers is very keen to highlight that, like, this era that they're in, which is like, year 2 of SNL. It was around the time of the last writer's strike before last year.
Oh yeah.
2007, I think. Talking about like that was a golden era of SNL because of like it was a trimmed down cast, but everybody on that cast was like an all-star that is now still an all-star and doing stuff.
Yeah.
Like there's like your Fred Armisen, your Kristen Wiig, your Jason Sudeikis, Bill Hader, Will Forte, like that class of like Amy Poehler before she's, done and wrapping up. Like that is kind of a great era, but there are, I'm sure, people that look at that and be like, oh, only 1 or 2 sketches is good. Show's so bad. Show's gone downhill. It's like, go back to those first seasons. Like, there's those early seasons have plenty of those kinds of episodes where like, oh, there's like 1 or 2 really memorable sketches from here.
It's interesting to think about it. It's like, actually, if you really do think about it, like I'm thinking about it. You got me thinking about it. Now it's like, I think in time you look back on those sketches and you're like, oh, these are really fantastic, versus, and you're only looking at the highlights. You're only looking at the hight reel. You're looking at the best of DVD collection.
Yeah, exactly. You're not like, you go through those other episodes, and like there are some, there are some episodes where it's like, oh, start to finish, this was an on fire episode. Everybody was firing on all cylinders. Everything went right, and they talk about like Justin Timberlake hosting for like the first or second time when you get like the Dick in the Box, and you've got, Come On Down to Omeleteville, or like everything that Justin did in those episodes, like those are all-timer episodes, and he's like an all-timer host kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But those are very few and far between. A lot of times you are going to get, oh, like this is a great host, and they had like 1 or 2 great sketches that they bring to the table. And then that becomes like a reliable thing that the next time they come around, let's do another thing with them.
Yeah.
The example from this week, Nate Bargatze or whatever, stand-up comedian, did the show last year, had a breakout sketch where it was like him as George Washington talking about all of the absurd ways that language is going to come into play in America. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, dude, he's also the one who's in the Top Chef, the Top Chef one.
Yep.
That is the I'm sorry.
Yep. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Yep.
I'm so sorry. That one is such a, like, once again, we're talking about these breakout ones, but like, it is. He
hosted last night, and they did like a new version of that kind of sketch of like, all right, he's George Washington again, and we're going to talk about how we're going to make up, a word for the number 12, and we're going to call it a dozen. Are there going to be any other words for numbers? Nope. And then they just move on to the next.
I saw a clip of that on TikTok this morning. I was watching it. I was like, oh, I didn't know this sketch was out there. I thought it was an older one. So that's great. No, and then he's like, Can we talk about what's going to happen to slaves and stuff?
What? After this war, all men will be free, including slaves. After a war, all men will be free. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Good stuff like that, or like skipping over certain things. It's really, really good.
So I think there are plenty of those cases. Like it's rare that you don't have like one thing each week, go viral from SNL. I think even in their like downtimes, they still hit that like one or two good episodes. I think for me, the thing that I think about more often is, especially in contrast with this movie, how much of a rebel is Lorne Michaels these days versus 1975 Lorne Michaels. These days, like 2024 Lorne Michaels is gotta be schmoozing with Republicans. Like, I don't think he is the, angry revolutionary that was, that in this movie quotes Che Guevara. Like, I don't think he's that Lorne Michaels anymore.
No, because he's also like a
they play.
Yeah.
They like when they have him like play himself and things, like again going to like SNL digital shorts. He'll be out to dinner with like big Republican mayors or gubernatorial candidates or like Republican politicians. He'll be having dinner with them when Andy Samberg's coming to pitch Laser Cats or something like that. And so like that's where I think it has a tendency to have lost its like bent in some of those kinds of conversations, but at the same time, other people take that baton on behalf of the show, and you'll get Tina Fey out there kind of decimating Sarah Palin as a character.
Yeah. Or you have like multiple guest starring. Well, I don't know, because like also, is it Lorne Michaels is allowing it, or is Lorne Michaels promoting it? The idea of having Alec Baldwin come in and be Trump.
I mean, well, famously, like they had Trump come in and host a show pre 2016 election kind of thing. Like and it like that was very much a like fuck this. Like, don't give him that kind of airtime.
Yeah.
He's not an entertaining good person for sketch comedy. Like that, it's a notoriously terrible episode because he can't fucking read cue cards.
Nope. Man can't read.
But yeah, also just like this is well into he's shown us exactly what he stands for.
Yeah.
And like it was a ratings grab rather than any kind of like ratings grab in spite of. And there were plenty of cast members on that show who were like, I don't want to be anywhere near him, in the credits or in the thank yous or anything like that. I'm here because this is my job and I have to be, but I wouldn't. But like, I imagine there were people who did not want to be on that episode
for sure.
But
yeah, well, so like
didn't have a say in it. So.
I asked, but then I'm like, but then we get post 2016 the election, and everything, and then we have, you have
Alec Baldwin come in and be Trump for
for,
I think that's like. That ends up being like, okay, we're going to stunt cast Alec Baldwin because we don't have somebody on cast that has a good Trump impression.
Sure.
Whereas now it's like James Austin, whatever.
Yeah, but then you also have what's his name? Old ass gangster movie. De
Niro.
De Niro, thank you. De Niro coming in and being the lawyer, the investigator, special investigator.
Yeah.
You have like that stuff going on, but I'm like, okay, is that like he's just letting it happen, or is he like pulling in friends?
I mean, it's SNL has a big enough cachet of like power that if they can pull in big name people. I mean, like, I guess not big name, but like Jim Gaffigan. The fact that their central political stuff right now is being led by either former cast members or entire guests. Like Jim Gaffigan is coming in and playing Walls in recent sketches, and he doesn't like he's never. I think he's maybe hosted before or something in the past.
Hosted,
but he's not a like SNL alum or anything like that. And I mean, same going back to the 90s when you had John Goodman in there as like Linda Tripp, right? I think that was it. But like they'll pull in people to be like, hey, it'd be great. Like, this is the person in the headlines these days. We don't have somebody that does a great version of that. Like Dana Carvey, they've they're bringing Dana Carvey back to be Biden, and I'm like, I even look at that, I'm like, Dana Carvey doesn't have a great Biden.
No.
He has like a couple things that he like latches onto and you know is making like his version of Biden does this, and it's fully leaning into like, oh, he says, let me tell you about this, and then moves on to a completely different topic or something like that. It's like, it's not a good Biden impression, but it's Dana Carvey, and he gets a cheer and an uproar kind of thing.
I think
so. I think like that's long been the lineage of SNL to bring in big names or guest names for spots like that kind of stuff. Like, hey, this is it's a one-off kind of thing. We don't need you in here for a ton of time. You just come in, you do, this, we'll, rehearse it Friday night, Saturday, you do it live, and then you're off to promote whatever other movie you're doing or something like that.
Yeah, so like we have things like that happen still in it. So, but I don't know, like you mentioned, is he still, like, I don't think he is. I do not think he's the big rebel anymore. He is by far like just part of the NBC establishment. Mm-hmm. He's been there for 50 years. He is like, that is part of, like, he is a like core part of NBC. He is beloved by several former cast members who love talking about him. So
everybody loves doing their Lorne Michaels impression.
Yeah. So you have like, there's a lot of, I don't know. I don't know. I think also Lorne Michaels has done enough to stay out of the spotlight enough.
Yeah.
That people just don't know him outside. Like, I don't know anybody who's like, well, I'm personal friend. Like, it's like, oh, he used to be my boss. And so we have a rapport. But he's also like, he spends his time hanging out with like the Rolling Stones and like Aerosmith. Like, he's known for having these like very famous groups of friends. So it's like, is he just so he just might just be so detached from the woes of the working man that, is he a rebel anymore? Probably not. But is he a dirtbag supporting and financing Republicans? Maybe not that either. I don't know.
Yeah. Anyway, so those are some thoughts on Saturday Night Live Saturday Night, and of course the lineage of Saturday Night Live in general as it goes into its 50th year here. And then real quick, since we spent a lot more time talking about Saturday Night than I thought we would. The other movie that I saw that I would have talked about had we done the show last week was The Wild Robot. Very different turn. This is the new animated film from DreamWorks about a robot that basically gets stranded on a deserted island, uninhabited island, or an island inhabited just by animals. Future robot is a helper robot, kind of needs tasks to do their work, and basically ends up getting the task of raising a goose, a little gosling. Hey, you need to take care of this duck now. Your task is feeding this duck, teaching it to swim, and making sure that it can fly by the fall, or it's going to die from the cold.
Okay.
So it ends up being about this robot that kind of ends up stumbling into motherhood, and what does that she effectively like rewrites her programming to be better suited for this kind of stuff. Ends up kind of partnering up with a little sneaky sly fox played by Pedro Pascal.
Awesome.
The robot is Lupita Nyong'o. And basically like the fox kind of shows her the way of the world, including the fact that like, hey, maybe you shouldn't trust everything I'm saying, because I would try and eat this egg or this little baby duck that you've got, or goose, gosling, whatever. But they end up kind of like finding camaraderie, while a lot of the other animals and critters of the island kind of keep them at arm's length, because that's the weird monster, this weird robot monster that nobody really trusts or wants to be engaged with, but they kind of keep an eye on her and keep her at arm's length and stuff like that. All in all, like, it is a very beautiful story. It's written and directed by Chris Sanders, who also wrote Lilo and Stitch and wrote How to Train Your Dragon. It is based on a book series from the last probably 20 years or so by Peter Brown. Just I think there's a lot of it's a beautiful film. It's DreamWorks animation, and does it. I mean, it is a great. I think a buzzword that you will latch onto is a great movie about found family.
Hey, you know me. You know I love found family.
Yeah.
Hey, found family. Let's go.
And the purpose that Roz, the robot, kind of finds in taking care of this kid, Bright Bill. And also, like, Bright Bill ends up being like a weird little kid because he's raised by a robot, and so he doesn't know how to interact with other geese, out there, and kind of there's a little bit of like a learning curve in that, kind of overcoming the prejudice that they have against Bright Bill because he was raised by the robot and nobody really wants to get close. But and then like the tensions that come into play because Roz's kind of programming is very much like, if I don't have a task, I need to go home to like base. Basically, I need to turn on my transmitter so somebody can come pick me up, and then I need to go back to the factory to be reset or repurposed or whatever. And so there's a struggle between, when is my task complete? There's tension between Roz and Bright Bill at times because Bright Bill doesn't necessarily get the full story of why Roz is taking care of him instead of like his own parents or something like that. And then it's gotten a lot of parallels to like the Iron Giant in terms of like Roz and the robots in general can be a very destructive force. Roz in particular has like programming that's basically like, hey, I'm programmed to not hurt you, kind of Isaac Asimov, rules and stuff like that. But other robots outside of Roz's line maybe show up at some point in the movie to like reacquire her, and maybe they're a little bit more hostile or have
there you go
things. Movie has some fun like ecological things to kind of say as well and comment on as kind of the course of the movie goes. I thought very fun and clever visual how the movie is presented visually in terms of like when we leave the island and see the world outside of this island, what kind of world are we looking at? Is it a world where humanity still exists, or is it what's going on out there? I think the movie plays around with some fun ideas there that I don't want to get into for spoiler purposes
reasons, for sure.
like that. But lots of great little performances from various cast of characters. So Roz shows up on this island and doesn't speak animal, but she uses her like computer learning to kind of plop down, and we get like this little montage of time passing and like her starting to pick up what all of the animal speak means and be able to speak to the animals and interpret animals and stuff like that. So that's how we get her being able to talk to a Pedro Pascal's voiced fox named Fink, or Bill Nighy is kind of an elder statesman goose called Longneck is in there. Catherine O'Hara plays Pinktail, who is like a very worn down possum mother of
yeah.
7, basically, who is very much kind of the like, hey, he's your task now, you need to take care of him, and just like I'm taking care of mine, and in my 7, and then a threat comes into play and they all play possum, and it turns into a whole gag about like all the kids trying to come up with like the most creative death. Like I'm dead because my guts were ripped out. Well, I'm dead because of poison in the air or something.
That's awesome.
Or I'm dead because of a brain aneurysm. You can't show that. Watch me. Kind of like. And so they have a lot of fun with that. So good fun, like little supporting cast of characters in here among the wider pool. But yeah, just it was a very beautiful, very charming film that I think has a great message about love and finding your purpose and finding that family and the hardships that come with that, and the tensions that might happen about finding your own path. Lupita Nyong'o does a great job of like humanizing Roz as the wild robot, and going from that like factory default settings of I'm going to say the things that I'm supposed to say, and are you my new customer? No, you're not. I don't understand what you're saying. Here's a sticker. Scan this QR code for more information. Kind of like whatever like the default settings on this robot are to learning about the community that she's kind of found herself in unwittingly, and learning to love this little found family that she has made. And they do a very good job kind of telling this little beautiful story that seems to, again, it's based on a book series, and there are at least a few books in that series, so this is maybe like book one, and then we'll see, if it does well enough, they'll probably do a book two, book three kind of thing. But yeah, had a great time with it. Lots of great little animation, great art style, beautiful animation in certain sequences that isn't just like it's. I haven't seen it yet, but a lot of people really touted the most recent Puss in Boots for how beautiful it looked, and this very beautiful like watercolor art style in sequences and stuff like that. Very much leaning into that kind of same art style and art design. So yeah, shout out to the Wild Robot. Don't have a ton to say on that, especially because I don't want to get into like spoilery things about it, or it doesn't have like certainly the like levels of analysis you can put on in terms of like how well do you know Saturday Night Live and whatnot.
Oh yeah.
But the Wild Robot, great movie, great family movie. Also, absolutely has some very scary moments that will, I'm sure, do the thing that like so many classic Disney movies do of like, oh, this will absolutely traumatize kids growing up, and they will think about this moment from this movie in terms of like that was a horrifying, chilling kind of beat, but also has so much beautiful story beyond that, and love to tell as well. So yeah, shout outs to that movie, The Wild Robot. Definitely check it out. If not, I mean, I would say this is a thing to go see in theaters because it is beautiful and just phenomenally portrayed on the big screen. I would say, I mean, this is a 10 out of 10 movie for me. I'll say that.
Oh, nice. Well. Okay, cool.
In terms of like, it's probably, I think it has surpassed Inside Out for my movie of the year so far. Just because of how well it executes on the story it's trying to tell and how beautifully it does it. And again, all the great performances therein. Also, the fact that like it, in a good way, it doesn't end where I expected it to end. Like,
oh, interesting.
It hits what I would have expected to be the natural endpoint for the movie, but then continues on to like, oh, actually, that was just kind of the end of, Act 2, and there's still more to go, and we're still going to have, like, here's the new conflict that comes in to finish us out in the story. So,
but it doesn't overstates
but not in
welcome.
a bad way. No.
Okay, cool.
No. It's it is all additory. It's like, oh, cool. It didn't end here because it wants to tell this, bit of the story now. It wants to examine this aspect of the found family.
It's taking these loose threads and tying them into a like part of the whole tapestry.
I mean, from the story that I've told, or from what I've mentioned thus far, you would think, oh, the movie's going to end when the migration happens. When the kid's going to grow up, he's going to learn to fly, and he's going to leave, and that's going to be the end, and yay. No, that's like halfway through the movie.
Okay, cool.
So like there is like, oh, it's Roz wrestling with what's her purpose now that her, for all intents and purposes, son has left the nest.
Ooh.
What does she do then?
Okay.
It's wintertime on the island. All the animals are, going into hibernation, but maybe it's a harsher storm than anybody was expecting. So, now they all need to bond together to survive, and Roz needs to kind of help with that. And, they've all kept Roz at arm's length, but maybe if she's like their only, possible future together, what does that look like? What does Roz being on this island look like when the family dynamic that she has created with Bright Bill is now extended to the whole ecosystem, and what does that mean? And what is her, what was left unsaid between her and Bright Bill, because there's tensions, as he goes off on the migration kind of thing. Will he make it back? What's that going to look like? Is she going to be here when he comes back? Because there's very much that like, oh, you're leaving. You need to go to you need to go on this migration because that's what is right for you. My purpose is complete, so I'm now going to turn my transmitter on and go back to factory settings, whatever. And they have that tension of like
Bright Pill basically like, oh, I finished raising you, I'm gonna go get killed purposefully.
Yeah,
and
I'm gonna go back and have my personality reset or whatever. Yeah,
and what does that do to a relationship? Like, oh, you need to leave, and when you get back, I will not be here. I will be dead for all intents and purposes. What does that do to that dynamic?
Yeah,
that's fascinating. I'm very interested in this film.
So yeah, definitely. If you can, go check it out in theaters. If not, I'm sure it'll be on various whatever streaming platforms when the time comes, and I will strongly encourage people to check it out there. Again, I've seen multiple comparisons, and I've made it myself to the Iron Giant, and the Iron Giant, cult classic now, did do great like in the moment of things. This fortunately, opened well. It was the number one last weekend. Brought in, I think, 50 million worldwide, kind of thing.
Oh, good.
On task to continue to do well, especially since Joker's falling apart already.
So this is a question I was going to ask. So we are already kind of seen this with Transformers 1. Transformers 1 has had a really rough box office launch. I feel like it will end up into the Spider-Verse category of films, of like a film that people didn't give a shot in theaters, but when it gets to streaming, does very well. And I was curious if this was also going to fall into that. You're like, it's a 10 out of 10 movie. How to do box office wise? So to hear that it's doing well box office wise, feel like sounds good.
I mean, it's doing well box office wise in that like it's one of the highest performing non-franchise, non-sequels of the year so far in only its second week. I think it's behind like If from earlier in the year, and maybe like one or two other things. But like that, I think part of the concern that I've seen analysts have is like, hey, if you really want like original ideas to be what does well in the box office kind of thing, you need to go out and support them. And going and supporting a movie like this is a step in that direction kind of thing. Otherwise, people aren't going to take that risk. And even this isn't an unknown quantity. As I said, it's based on a book series, beloved kind of children's book series kind of thing. So even that, it's not an original idea, but, it has the might of DreamWorks behind it, but it is, trying to tell its own story and do its own thing. And I admittedly, I had probably only seen like one trailer before going and seeing this, and it was like when I saw Inside Out 2, I was like, oh, I saw a trailer for this, and I was like, oh, that looks like an interesting movie. I want to keep an eye on that for like when it actually comes out. I want to see what that what the end product looks like, because it looks like an interesting idea that I want to see how they execute on, and they execute on it brilliantly. And so it did very well. Again, it came out in a time where there wasn't a ton of competition, or it's Beetlejuice kind of slipping down after its first couple weeks, and so it came out, did better than as you touched on Transformers 1, which Transformers 1 by all intents and by all accounts, probably one of the best of the Transformers movies, if not the best, but poorly marketed, and Transformers has already burned its bridges because of all of the bad ones that people are just like, I'm not willing to give this a shot, or that looks like a thing I'll give a shot when it comes to streaming or something like that.
Transformers Last Night has really hurt that franchise.
I mean, it's the Bumblebee a couple movies ago was like, oh, people really love Bumblebee and thought that was a great movie, but it had already it didn't do great at the box office because of all the bad Transformers before it. And then Rise of the Beast last year opened even worse than Bumblebee, I think.
Yeah.
And so it's just kind of, Transformers is just on the downhill thing, which also, it doesn't help in the context of it's because Michael Bay isn't making them big and bombastic and stupid anymore. People they're actually trying to make Transformers that have Transformers story and actually lean into characters and stuff. And the diehard Transformers people like that, but maybe the reason the Transformers movies did so well is because people like dumb turn off brain movies, and that's not what these are as much anymore. But yeah,
I mean,
Wild Robot.
Chris Hemsworth is Optimus Prime in this one,
Yeah.
so it's like you think that would be the star of the vehicle.
I mean, but that's the problem is like, okay, he's the star. It's not seeing him on screen; it's hearing his voice. And it's like, okay, so for doing press, cool, we get to see Chris Hemsworth, like, you know, but how much of a talented voice actor is Chris Hemsworth, kind of thing, especially for the diehards that are like, well, he's not Peter Cullen, so he's not my Optimus Prime.
Yep, yeah, but another issue with that too. Yeah, and the fact that,
I mean, yeah, like I've heard plenty of things of like Chris Hemsworth does a good job is this version of Optimus, and Brian Tyree Henry especially does a great job as Megatron. Keegan-Michael Key as Bumblebee is fun to actually have somebody as Bumblebee in that. But
Evan Michael Lee is, I forgot who he is in it, but he's in it as well. He's in their voice actor. He's a voice actor I follow on Twitter because he is like.
I just didn't hear what
name Evan Michael Lee.
Oh, gotcha.
Yep. He is an awesome voice actor. Funny enough, I was surprised when his voice popped up, or when his name popped up in the credits for Unicorn Overlord. He plays the Sentinel guy who's the first person who's brainwashed that you deal with. He's an awesome voice actor. Certainly not so not a celebrity voice actor.
I was gonna say like
you name celebrities and I should.
In looking through the cast, like he is not among the first 8 names that pop up here, because you also have stuff like Steve Buscemi and John Hamm in here. Yeah. And Lawrence Fishburne. And by all accounts, they're great for the roles that they come in and do. But yeah. Evan Michael Lee as Jazz is like 10 or 11 down, it looks like, on the cast list.
Well, I'm putting it out there because I only really know about Transformers 1 from his Twitter. That's what I was going to lead into, being like, this movie was not marketed well at all.
Yeah.
Also,
it like the trailers were terrible.
Yeah.
Like that's the other thing. Like I remember seeing the trailers, I was like, well, I've never really cared about Transformers, so this is not this is a movie I almost went and did a double feature last week of The Wild Robot and Transformers 1, but when you on Sunday were like, hey, I'm not feeling too well, so we're just going to not do a show, I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to bother going to see Transformers 1. But like I was ready to go see Transformers 1 on Sunday last week to, have a couple things to talk about for last week's show. And then ultimately just kind of like was like, I just didn't get around to it. But it's one, like, I really love Brian Tyree Henry, especially. He pops up in a lot of interesting things. He's the dad in the Spider-Verse movies, which I very much love, and which we're going to go head out here in a little bit to go see Across the Spider-Verse live in concert. So
man, isn't it a good idea that I was like a 2-ish, right?
Yeah. Yep. So like him as Megatron in this like this being like the origin story of kind of the Optimus and Megatron stuff. Heard nothing but great things about him and his performance in there. It's just a matter of like, how, as somebody who isn't a super Transformers nerd, is it going to be this, like, would it be the same thing I've been talking about with Saturday Night of like, oh, I'm not going to get all these deep cut references because I'm not Tim Geddes and have this encyclopedic knowledge of who all those different background Transformers are.
Yeah. I would say I would take the cue from Andy Cortez, who said the trailer to actual quality of movie. Yeah. This is the inverse of Suicide Squad. Suicide Squad had that incredible trailer. Yeah. Absolute garbage trash movie.
Yep. But it's still a matter of like, all right, but it's still time and it's still money that I need to like.
Oh, the money. That's why I haven't seen them. Yeah. Like I haven't seen it. So like,
I prioritized Wild Robot. I was very interested in Saturday Night. I'm very interested in because of my connection to that franchise and sketch comedy stuff. And so this has just kind of been like, oh, if I wasn't playing, as much Baldur's Gate 3 as I'm playing, sure, I'd be like, all right, I'll go kill some time and go catch another movie and go catch Transformers 1. But I'm also okay not spending that $17 to go see a movie that I'm sure will be good, but
you care about
it's my time. Do I care about it? Versus, hey, when it comes to streaming, I'll catch it on streaming and enjoy it enough on streaming while I'm probably doing something else, while I'm building Lego or something like that. Maybe maybe that's what I'll do. when it comes to streaming, I'll build my Lego Optimus Prime
Oh, the big one.
as while I watch that movie.
There you go.
Like that. Yeah. Anyway, so those are some thoughts on Saturday Night and the Wild Robots, as well as some game thoughts. But yeah, as I said, we're going to head out very shortly here to go see Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse in concert. As a fun little treat, we did Into the Spider-Verse last year. Across the Spider-Verse here in Phoenix tonight. So we're going to go head out and do that. But before we do, it's going to wrap up this episode. Thank you, Cam, for joining me to chat all these things. You can follow Cameron at RevCabot, 2 B's and 2 T's. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Cam?
Yeah, our most recent That D Plus show we did was about Mickey's Halloween, or the scariest or spookiest story ever told.
The scariest story ever. A Mickey Mouse Halloween Spooktacular.
Thank you. I was calling it just Mickey Spooktacular with my family.
Yeah.
It's quite the ride. I think it's a really fun episode. We really go into the details that we really enjoyed about it, and kind of the surprises we had versus our expectations versus what we got out of the short. So, also heads up, because I didn't tell you this. My nephew went home and tried turning on YouTube to find our podcast. Because he's like, I want to know more about the Mickey Spooktacular. And my sister-in-law was just like, it's a podcast, you listen to it. And he was like, oh, okay. Because I think he thought we were like reacting to it or something.
I mean, like, he would find the video on YouTube too.
He would. I told her that later. But also, I mentioned we do an hour and a half of like Nielsen's, or an hour of like,
we talk a lot about TV from 2017. And also, I don't know how old your nephew is, but we're maybe not all ages friendly.
For sure. That was another thing too, is like my mom, this is what's killer, is my mom, before I left, she said,
I try to make a conscious effort, especially when we're talking about like younger targeted shows, like a Mickey Mouse animated thing, maybe not curse as much, but you do not seem to have any certain qualms about that kind of thing, and you went full in on stuff like that last
I mean,
week.
I think I only dropped one F-bomb. That's it. So I definitely was saying like, you damn shit, other stuff. But yeah, my mother, before I left, she goes, all right, and make sure you don't swear. I was like, I was like, that's not happening with me.
Yeah.
And then later when I found out that I was a nephew, I was like, oh no, what did he like? I was like, but wait, he would not have even gotten past the first like 10 minutes, because we just go into like Nielsen's ratings and TV stuff. Like, I'm like, it's gonna be super boring for him. Like I'm like, don't do that. Just have him watch the short.
Yeah.
So yeah. But yeah, fun episode that we go into. We really talked about TV instead of movies for the first time, which was a lot of fun for us. So if you've ever been a fan of like Cameron Guesses the box office game, this is our TV version of it, and we had a really fun time with it.
Yeah. You can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey. We will continue our Halloween-themed month of That D Plus show stuff this week with Goosebumps. Specifically, we're going to talk about the episode The Night of the Living Dummy, as a both just what does this series look like in terms of that Disney Plus series, as well as Goosebumps was a franchise that we both read voraciously growing up. So it should be a fun one to chat about that. So, but yeah, we'll be doing Halloween's themed stuff all month long on That D Plus show this month. So stay tuned for that. You follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site, or go to thatnerdysite.com for all the latest from us. Once again, if you liked what you heard, please remember to rate, review, like, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. Thank you for listening. As always, stay nerdy and be good to each other.